Yo, so the main event, right? Ian Machado Garry against Carlos Protas. Protas. Uh, Now, this fight came together on late notice. You know what I mean? For both fighters, right? There's the original main event was going to be Jamal Hill against Khalil Roundtree Jr. But I think Jamal got injured, right? So they had to move that fight, right? So this one came about, and I think as a substitute fight, what a great matchup! Because yes, Gary lost to Shabkat, but he was in that fight. He wasn't blown out the water. And yes, there was his word that Shavkat went into that fight injured. But still, Gary wasn't blown out. He had Shavkat in some bad situations. If that rear naked was, positioned a little bit better, maybe he wins that fight. You know what I mean? And practice being on a tear. Being on a tear like the rest of his brethren in the fighting nerds. So this fight was, possibly giving us a number one contender. Now, obviously, right? Joaquin Buckley as a thing to say about that, though he's got Kamaru Usman coming up. You know what I mean? It's the welterweight division is crazy right now. So this fight was intriguing. Definitely intriguing. And Gary, we know he's good, right? We know he's legit. He hasn't had a big finish in a while, right? Hasn't had a big finish in a while. But practice has been murking people. So I think, I think Gary's last finish was May 2023 against Daniel Rodriguez, which was really fucking good, you know? But yeah, it's been a minute, right? And Prates has been murking Cat. So I think going in, a lot of people thought, Prates could knock him out. But when I was looking at this fight, it's not what have you done for me lately. It's thinking about everything. And Machado Garry has got a really good way of controlling the pace of a fight. Right, of keeping people at bay, using his reach, using his kicks, you know what I mean? Good movement, just good IQ in the cage. So it was just like that, as well as, Gary's fought the better competition and had more fights, right? So when you're looking at everything, it's just like, I think Gary has got what it's needed to be able to slow things down, right? And control this fight. And jeez, that's what happened, people. That's what happened. Ian Machado Garry. Now, what I find super interesting, right? This fight, it was, a unanimous decision for Gary. But the cards were 48-47, 48-47, and 49-46. I thought it should have been 49-46 across the board. I don't really see another round. Prates won. Gary controlled this fight from start to finish. It was so impressive. He's playing, right? Because what he was doing, moving around, throwing out a few jabs, But then when you think, oh, that's the pace, he then blitzed forward with a huge combo. And that was like, as long with throwing in the takedown attempts at first, right? Because it wasn't until the third round that he actually got two really well put together takedowns. You know what I mean? But up to that point, he was just toying with the idea, throwing you that idea to keep you off balance. And so Garry, he was doing all of this, where Prates, he was always in the fight, right? Because of the power and his confidence, right? Because when you've been on such a tear, when your team has been on such a tear, you believe you can do anything. Regardless, I might be down, I'll still win this. So Prates was always in the fight, but because Garry had thrown so much at him, and when I say so much, I'm not just talking about the long combos, but I mean, right, the feints, the takedown attempt, just all of this, he had to be cautious, which then opened things up even more for Garry, right? Garry's using his kicks really well, right? Throwing a lot of kicks to the arms, and Prates was blocking those shots for sure. But firstly, he knocked out Daniel Rodriguez with a head kick that Rodriguez blocked, right? Had his arm up, but he still knocked him out. And, you know, so there's that possibility. But the other thing that does, right, you're blocking them with your arm. It's deading your fucking arm, right? It's deading your arm, which then means it's sucking the power out of the shot. So it's super smart, right? But he's attacking the body, which again, right? Your power comes from your core, right? Your ability to pivot and follow through. So if your body's fucking aching and you can't do that as much, not as much power. Yes, that's right, people. That is correct. So Garry was doing all of this stuff, you know, ends the first round with ground and pound. Now, Prates slipped, right? But Garry took advantage and landed good shots. Right? The interesting thing, when you look at everything, right, because Prates cut Garry open, I think in the fourth round, right, with an elbow. I think it was the fourth round, or it may have been the third, but I think it was the fourth. Did cut him open. And I think Prates had this little cut under the eye, not really bleeding that much. So it does it did make me think about the whole, you know, the change to the rule set. So it's about damage, where some people show damage a lot more than others, right? So you don't even have to be hit with the hardest, but you're gonna bruise, you're gonna cut. Which does, you know what I mean, throw up that interesting thing that, you know, if you were doing it solely on damage, you might give the fight to Prates. But Garry was the one who landed more. And he was putting together great combinations. When he landed a big shot, and there was the possibility, right? Or Prates was slightly, you know, stunned, stalled. He then unleashed a barrel of shots. And that was, I mean, it was great. It showed Prates that Garry, you know what I mean, he's not just one tempo, and it just keeps you off balance. You know, and it had that hunger, like, I'm trying to finish this fight, right? It was funny, I think it was the end of the third round or the fourth round. And I think it was the third. Garry's coach is like, oh, like we want combinations. It's like start with just the one big shots, and it's just like, I mean, come on, man. He's been throwing combinations all the time. What are we talking about? You know what I mean? But no, this was a really good fucking fight. Now, from I think the fourth round, it wasn't until the third round that Prates threw a really heavy body kick. You know what I mean? But then Garry just turned it on and like, boom, shut him down. Now, in the fourth round, Prates, was landing more, right? He kind of upped his tempo a little bit. But it wasn't until the fifth where you had to have a finish that we really saw him, try more. And there was opportunities, right? And it's interesting because we saw it in the fight before, in the co-main, you know what I mean? When we had Anthony Smith against Zhang Mingyang, right? When Smith went to the ground and he's got his arms over his head and Zhang Ming is just winging shots down on him, he wasn't moving. In this fight, Garry is moving constantly, trying to better his position, trying to stay safe. And that's the big difference, right? When you want to be there and it's just like, yeah, I don't want to be here no more. And Garry he wanted this fight. He wanted to show that he is the top shotter, that he is the number one contender. He deserves that next shot, right? So he was doing everything in his ability. Now, Prates, he wasn't blown away, right? He showed he got taken down, right? A good few times. It was the first time he'd been taken down in the UFC. Now, a few of those times he showed really good ability to get back up. And he showed good ability to stuff a shot at times. And then in that final round, because he'd attempted it beforehand, but, Garry was able to power through. But yeah, when he just stuffed the takedown attempt and then forced himself to, get on top position, right? That, all of those things were like, okay, this is good. This is good to see. And then in the fifth, when he is trying to finish the fight, right? When he's throwing mad ground and pound, trying to finish the fight, these are all good things you want to see from your fighter, and it shows that, yes, he wasn't quite ready for this, right? And when I say he wasn't quite ready, I mean, in the moment, he wasn't able to change his plan, right? When Garry was frustrating him, he didn't have another answer, right? But what we did see was that he was there to the end, never gave up on himself, right? So this ain't the end for Carlos Prates. He's gonna be back, right? His gas tank held up, so all the people thinking that him and those cigarettes, right, were, his bane, we didn't see it. He was cool over 5. So yeah, I think Prates is going to be back, but right now, Machado Garry showed the world he ain't fucking around, son. And he's gonna be in Montreal as the backup for, I don't know if that's official. They might be like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. You know what I mean? But Garry is doing everything to position himself in the right way. So kudos to that motherfucker, because Garry, he just did what many could not, and that was he beat Carlos Prates. Congratulations, Ian Machado Garry.